Israel goes to the polls once again on Tuesday, the fifth election in 4 years. Multiple polls have said that the former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition will fall just one seat short of that 60-seat majority mark. Can the former Prime Minister get a mandate that will allow him to stay on in power this time around? Or will fragile coalition politics lead to his ouster again? Let's take a closer look now at the battle, the contenders for the Israel Prime Minister's post. First, of course, there is Netanyahu. He was in power for 12 consecutive years, till 2021. In fact, in 2019, Netanyahu was indicted for corruption on serious charges. His right-wing party is predicted to emerge as the largest in the parliament, but surveys say that his coalition will fall short of a majority. Remember, Netanyahu has failed to keep his hold on a coalition government in the last 4 elections. Netanyahu's fiercest rival for the top spot is the current Prime Minister Yair Lapid. His party, which translates to There is a Future Party, is second in the polls, and his party is not expected to win outright. And he has less allies as compared to Netanyahu. He would have to cobble together a broad coalition once again to return to power. And then there is the Defense Minister, Benny Gantz. He heads the centre-right National Unity Party. The party is expected to trail Netanyahu's and Lapid's in the polls. But at the same time, opinion polls say he may end up being the kingmaker. And reports say he could even become the Prime Minister by offering his support to one of the coalitions in exchange for the top post. Not just that, reports say all the smaller parties can influence the final outcome. One party of interest here is the far-right Jewish Power Party. It is headed by Itamar Ben-Gvir. In 2017, Ben-Gvir was convicted of racist incitement and support for a group that both Israel and the US had listed as terrorists. Ben-Gvir and his allies are expected to come third in the upcoming election. And then there are the Arabs in Israel. They form about a fifth of the population, but are underrepresented in the parliament. A high turnout could harm Netanyahu's chances, and the outgoing government had an Arab party in the ruling coalition for the first time in Israel's history. Let's now for a moment imagine that Netanyahu does make his comeback. What could this mean for Israel and for the rest of the world? Well, it could be a boost for Ukraine. Netanyahu has said, remember, that he would look into supplying weapons to Israel if he comes to power. Netanyahu also expects that he may be called to act as mediator between Russia and Ukraine if he becomes the Prime Minister again. Israel has a strategic relationship with Russia and so has resisted getting involved in the war. Netanyahu's return could spell trouble for the newly signed maritime deal with Lebanon. He has panned the Lapid regime for signing the deal, saying it goes against the Israeli interests. And if Netanyahu returns, he may pull out of the deal, which is one of the signature achievements of Lapid's tenure. And as for Iran, Netanyahu has always considered it to be an enemy state. That is one view he and Lapid did not diverge on. In fact, irrespective of who is in charge, Israel-Iran relations are not expected to change. And closer to home, what would Netanyahu's rise mean for Palestinians? Would Lapid's declaration of support for the two-state solution be forgotten? Probably. Netanyahu has himself on occasion said that he supports the solution, but he did not act on this during his past stint in power. When Lapid declared that the solution was the way forward at the UN, Netanyahu's party was up in arms. Netanyahu is the leader of a right-wing coalition, and his allies are likely to block any move towards a separate Palestine if he comes to power. And what happens if Israel fails to form a government? Well, a deadlocked election would see Israel go to the polls again within months. That would be the 6th election if it occurs. And Lapid would remain in office as the caretaker Prime Minister. Stability or continued political instability, that is the decision that Israelis will be taking on Tuesday. With me on the broadcast this minute is Amikai Stein from Jerusalem. Stein is a diplomatic correspondent at Israel Khan Television. Thanks very much for being here with us on the broadcast. Let me begin by asking you for your assessment of where things stand at the moment.
So, at least from the point of view of the parties, we are starting getting text messages in the last hours saying we are going to lose. But what's interesting, it comes from the right and from the left, meaning someone is lying at this point. So the battle over the turnout has begun a bit earlier than usual because, of course, the elections are tomorrow. But let's say, according to the polls, we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow when the polls close at 10 o'clock because the margins and the difference is very tight. We're talking maybe 61 Netanyahu, sometimes he has 60 MPs, coalition, sometimes 59. These are the numbers, and when the numbers are so small between a majority and between losing these elections, it's hard to know what is going to be exactly tomorrow at night. That's why the parties are focusing mainly at this point at taking the people to go out and vote as much as they can.
Indeed. Let's also take a step back and talk about why this election is so significant and what is at stake here, given how the economic troubles, the security troubles have been mounting. How crucial is it for Israel to finally have a conclusive outcome after 4 inconclusive elections?
So first of all, it's the first elections that Netanyahu isn't running as a prime minister. In the last 4 elections, Netanyahu ran as a prime minister. This time, he's the head of the opposition. And this makes things a lot different. Because, first of all, Netanyahu, it's very funny. He was prime minister for 12 years, but suddenly he presents things that he can do in 1 month that he didn't do in these 12 years. It's much more easier for a politician to promise. And you said a right statement, because in the recent days, the issue of the security of the Israeli public has become the main focus, because we've seen in recent days a lot of shooting attacks by Palestinian terrorists against Israelis in several areas. And this brings to a focus in the last hours before polling opens, the issue of security. And this is usually much more better for the right in Israel when it comes to security issues. And you pointed out the party of Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, 2 far-right Israeli politicians that are doing amazingly good in the polls. They're doing 15 MPs right now. At this point, they have about 8 or even less in this is the way they began this election race. So they have 15 MPs. The number might go even up. They're right now fighting between them and the Likud to get as much votes as they can. It's a very interesting race because Netanyahu doesn't want them to be that strong. He does want them in the coalition, but he doesn't want them as a big party. So it's a very interesting race even between the right itself, not just between the blocks of the left and right, but also in the right itself. Will Netanyahu have suddenly a party that he will have to listen to, as opposed to him ruling a coalition when he doesn't usually listen to his partners?
Indeed. So the stakes are high. The expectations are running high as well. We're leaving it there for the moment, though. Thanks very much for being here on the broadcast. WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.